Howdy, folks, and welcome to the Hunting Stories Podcast. I'm your host, Michael, and we got another great episode for you today. Today, we're actually connecting with someone that I met in Molokai when I went on that week-long axis deer hunt. Today, we're connecting with Ryan Michler. I'll tell you this, I had heard about him before I went on that trip, and man, did he impress me. He's a great guy. He surrounds himself with great guys, and he's doing some really cool stuff. If you aren't following him, check him out on Instagram. Check out the show notes for all of his links. He's the founder of the Iron Council, which is the Order of Man. He's just doing great stuff, and he's helping men become better men, which is really all you can ask for. So I don't want to steal too much thunder. He does tell a different side to a story that we've heard on this podcast before, which I really appreciate, but he has some great stories for us, and I'm sure we'll have him back again sometime in the future. So Ryan, thank you for coming on. Now let's go ahead and let Ryan tell you some of his stories. Thank you. All right, Ryan, welcome to the Hunting Stories Podcast, brother. How are you?
I'm good, man. Glad to be here. It's been a little while since we were able to connect since Hawaii earlier in the year, but glad to be back with you, man.
Yeah, man, it's great to see your face. It brings back a lot of good memories, and that was one of the most fun hunts I think I've ever been on. And never mind the fact that it was just like constantly perfect weather. Like you don't often get that when you're hunting, right?
Oh yeah, I mean perfect weather, good hunting, lots of animals, lots of success. Obviously, good company out there. You shot a really nice axis buck, which was a beautiful buck that you shot. What an incredible! I love hunting. I mean, it's awesome that we could all go out there, and the hunting aspect obviously is good, but the connections that you make and enjoying nature, there's so much to it. I love.
Yeah, absolutely. I've stayed in contact with basically everybody from that trip. It was a solid group. That's all I can say about it. But let's take a quick pause from this conversation, Ryan. Why don't we just real quick have you introduce yourself? I'm sure a lot of people already know who you are, but for those that don't, who is Ryan Michler?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a father of four. First, I founded a company called Order of Man almost 10 years ago, which is wild to think. I had a financial planning practice before that, and started doing some podcasting with the financial planning practice and realized, man, I love this medium, which was relatively new at the time and took off with it. But I realized I wanted to have a different conversation. So our organization is focused on helping men with the tools and resources they need to thrive in their own lives, which is what I needed then and I still need today. Outside of that, I've been hunting for 8 or 9 years. A mutual friend, Colin, got me into hunting, and also some of my friends as well. Yeah. Did you not know that?
I didn't know Colin got you into it. No, I did not. We'll put a pin in that. I want to hear that story. But yeah, I did not know that, man.
Yeah. So he got me into hunting, like I said, 8 years ago, and I caught the bug quick. And man, I've been hunting everywhere since, not only here in the States, but I just went to Africa earlier this year. So it's been a wild ride, an exciting one.
Yeah, you've been going after it. It seems like every time I send you a message being like, hey, Ryan, let's get on this podcast, look at your social media, you're in Africa or you're in, where were you recently? Like Wisconsin or something, hunting whitetail? Just you're always in a tree stand. Minnesota, that's it. Yeah.
Yeah, I was in awesome. In Minnesota. Yeah.
That's cool. Do you have success?
No. It was a good hunt camp.
It's hunting.
But I shot a doe, and I thought I made a great shot on it, but just kind of reviewing it in my head, because I tracked her for hours and never could find her. And after thinking about it in my head, I hit her in the right space just behind the shoulder, but I think she was a little bit more quartered to me than I initially thought. And so my arrow didn't pass through, and I almost wonder if it dug into her back hip and just pegged into her back hip, because I found the half of the arrow that went in, and it broke off, and plenty of blood, followed it for a while, and I never could find her, which was frustrating.
That is frustrating, especially, I mean, an arrow going that deep on a white-tailed doe, I'm sure she's down, but...
Oh, she's dead. She's dead, 100%.
Yeah.
But yeah.
She found a nice place to fall asleep, I guess. So
yeah,
too good of a place. But cool, Ryan, man. I'm glad you're here. I want to hear whatever stories you want to tell us today, but I told you beforehand, I do have one request, and that is I want to hear your side of one of my favorite stories, which is Rick's story, right? Where the two of you, I don't know if it's your first year in Hawaii or second year in Hawaii, but where he's chasing after a doe right after you killed one, or he's chasing after a buck, and he just blows out his leg, right? So I would love to hear your side of that story. You can start wherever you want in that story, from your first harvest, or you can skip that part if you don't want to talk about it. You tell me, man. But that's kind of where I wanted to start today.
Let's just get into the funny version. And I think you've had Rick on the podcast, and he tells it way more hilariously than I ever could.
God.
He's so funny.
My eyes were watering.
So animated.
My eyes were watering. Yeah.
No, I think it was my second year in Hawaii. I think it might have been his first. I don't quite remember, but this was probably 4 or 5 years ago. But yeah, we're out there, and axis deer in Hawaii, they're hard to hunt. They're twitchy. They're always turned on. They're fast. They're very aware and very assertive of their surroundings. So it's hard to shoot an axis deer. And Rick and I had kind of split up. I lost
half my arrows actually right before I realized I need to make some adjustments. I was out of half of my arrows. So yeah, they're
I know
tough
it goes fast. Yeah, but so Rick and I had split up, and I was kind of holed up looking for deer, and I saw a deer, and I started working my way over there. And as I was walking over, I found the deer, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to stock up on him. I'm going to make this approach. And Rick is like laying on the ground. Like I ran into him, and he's laying on the ground. I'm like, what the hell are you doing? He's like incapacitated. And he's like, dude, I hurt myself. I'm like, be quiet. There's a deer right there. And he's like, I know, I shot him. I'm like, no, right there, there's a deer. He's like, yeah, I shot him. And I'm like, well, what are you doing? And I guess what had happened is he shot the deer, and then he was running to him, and he had pulled his hamstring or his hip. I don't know what he did, but he's on the ground, and he
like blew out his knee.
Yeah, he thought he broke his leg. Actually, man. I remember him saying, that.
Okay.
And so he thought his leg was broken, and I'm like, there's a deer, and he's wounded. I could see now that the deer is wounded because I know he's been shot. So I'm telling Rick, I'm like, shh. And I'm telling him to be quiet because he's loud and noisy, and he's like crawling on his arms, dragging his broken leg behind him, just totally incapacitated. And I don't know how many arrows we shot into that deer. That was the most resilient deer. I think I ended up shooting him again, and I kind of walked in, I shot him again. And then Rick kind of like stumbled up and got up on his knees, and he shot him. And the thing was just bedded down. And I think if I remember correctly, what happened is
Rick shot him again. He didn't tell that in his side of the story.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. And then what ended up happening is the deer stood up, and I shot him one more time. And the deer just finally, I mean, he wouldn't go down, but finally you could see the blood pouring out of the deer, and he's just standing there. I'm like, is this deer going to go down or what? And finally he goes down. So I'm like, sweet. Rick can't help me drag this thing out of the jungle. And we knew our guys were a ways back. And so I'm like, Rick, you stay here. I'm going to go get some help because we need help with the deer, and we need help with you. So I walk back to the truck or wherever the guys are, and Rick's laying there just feeling all the pain, but all the joy of having harvested this really nice axis deer buck. And it's getting dark at that point. And I know Rick's out there by himself, and I don't know his side of it, but I know he's freaked out. He's sitting in the Hawaiian jungle, just with nobody around. He's got a dead deer laying next to him. He doesn't know if his leg is broken. And we get over there, and we had a friend, his name is Brandon Lilly, who was there with us on the hunt. And Brandon Lilly is a world-class power lifter. Had some injuries that kind of took him out of his career, but the man is a beast of a human being. Yeah, and just massive and shaved head and beard and tatted up. He's a very intimidating figure. If you didn't know him, he's the nicest guy in the world. But if you didn't know him, you'd be very intimidated by him. And so the way that Rick tells it is, it's dusk on this Hawaiian island. Nobody else is out there. It's getting dark, and you can see a little bit of fog setting in and the dust kicking up. And Rick looks up, and he sees through this dust and this dusk that there's this just mountain of a man walking through this cloud of dust and fog. And he's like, Rick, where are you? And Rick is like, Brandon, I'm over here. And he had these lighted knocks on his arrows. So he's waving his arrow with the lighted knock. And Brandon comes over, and the way Rick says it is just kind of scoops him up, like baskets him in his arms. And he's like, I got you, Rick. And he walks him out of the jungle as he's carrying Rick. And Rick's not a small human being. He's 6'5". No. He's probably 250. And Brandon's just carrying him like he's a little child. It's hilarious. So anyways, we get out there, and because of Brandon's background in sports medicine and recovery and the things that he went through, he said it's a level 2 meniscus something tear, and it'll be good in 3 days. And sure enough, 3 days later, Rick's back on his feet. But man, that was one of our. It's funny with Rick and I, we have a tendency of shooting each other's animals. I don't know what it is. Yeah, he said that. We have 5 stories where I've shot one of his to kill it. He shot one of mine. It happens all the time, and I don't understand why, but I like having Rick around because my success rate goes up when he's with me. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. Let me ask you this. When it comes to you both shooting an animal, say it's like a trophy buck, right? Whether it's an axis buck or a whitetail buck or whatever, who gets it? Who shoots it first, or who puts it down? Hey, hunters. Have you ever had one of those stories, the ones that you didn't want to tell, the ones that end in failure? Yeah, I've been there. Actually, you know what? The culprit for me usually is bad optics, or worse, lack of using my optics at all. Picture this. I spot a trophy buck, or an antelope, or an elk, whatever it may be. My heart is racing, but the blurry view, or I just can't quite identify exactly what I'm looking at, it has me second guessing. Well, that's where Vortex Optics comes in. With crystal clear glass and rugged durability, Vortex gives you the confidence to take the shot. Don't let poor optics ruin your story. Make every moment count. Upgrade to Vortex and turn your hunting tales into triumphs. Visit vortexoptics.com today.
The general rule is whoever draws first blood. That's the general rule.
Okay.
That's,
I was curious.
I think that's just generally a rule, but that's what Rick and I, because look, at the end of the day, the animals that he shot and the animals that I've shot, they all been fatal shots, but for whatever reason, I can tell a bunch of other stories. Yeah. It's just, hey, let's put this thing out of its misery and wrap this thing up. And it just works out like that sometimes. Very weird circumstances, very odd stuff that happens. But yeah, I shot a big buck in Minnesota 3 or 4 years ago. And it was a beast. It was 296 pounds, 296 pound whitetail on the hoof. Not a huge rack, good mature buck. Nice thickness, nice mass. Not not as big as it should have been based on his body size, but one of the biggest physical deers that I've ever shot before. And that was one of those stories where him and I did that together. I made a fatal shot. I got charged by that deer. In fact, I had to dodge because it charged at me. Yeah, it was hilarious. That's one of my favorite experiences for sure.
Well, hey, if you want to dive into that story, I'd love to hear it. And also the reason I ask is my first hunting kill ever. My brother-in-law shot an elk with a muzzleloader. And then there were multiple elks, so I just thought I was shooting a different elk. Ended up being the same elk. So I was just curious how you guys go about.
What did you guys decide?
First shot. So he took home the head, and we split the meat. So it wasn't a big deal. I'm just curious. It was a 300-inch bull, so massive bull.
Nice
but
bull.
The reason I ask is I also interviewed Cody Rich. Not sure if you know who that is, but he's a big Western big game guy. Perfect. So he hunted a lot in Oregon, and apparently the state law in Oregon is the last shooter gets it. So he has 2 stories that he had on my podcast where he or someone he was out hunting with shot a bull. They're tracking the bull. They hear another shot as they're getting close. They go up and they're like, "Oh, huh." Like somebody took his harvest from him. Legally in Oregon, that's how it works. So I was just curious how other people manage those situations.
Yeah, I don't know. The hard part is like, how do you know which shot was which and which one was the fatal one? I think it starts to get a little convoluted. So I've always said and thought that whoever draws first blood, if you shoot and miss, that's not your deer. But if you shoot it and hit it, even if it's non-fatal, I still would consider that somebody else's. I would not consider that my deer.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you on that one. I didn't think twice about it until I think I talked to Cody, and Cody was like, second shooter gets it. And I'm like, that doesn't make all that much sense, but I guess whatever. Either way,
there's a lot of hunting rules that don't make a lot of sense. So
that's the truth, man.
Yeah.
All right, well, let's hear that whitetail story. You're getting charged. I'd love to hear that one, man.
Yeah, so I'm up in a stand, and I've been hunting Minnesota at that point for 4 or 5 years, and had never harvested a big mature bull or buck, excuse me. So I'm sitting in this tree stand, and this guy comes in, and I know what kind of deer they have out there, and I could see that he didn't have a huge rack, and I'm kind of him and hawing around like, is this the deer I want to shoot? I don't know, maybe. So I'm just sitting there watching him, not really anticipating I'm going to shoot him. I'm going to wait.
Yeah.
And he comes in a little further, and I realize, oh boy, like this guy's big. This is a big mature deer. I'm going to shoot him. So I draw back and I shoot, and I thought I made a good shot. And when I hit him, I knew I didn't. I thought I hit him far back, more in the hip crease than behind the shoulder. I'm like, oh, I made a bad shot. And it hit him, and he ran about 5 yards, and he stood behind this tree that was maybe 2 or 3 inches thick. And that 2 or 3 inches was right in front of his vitals, but he's just standing there. I know he's already hit. I'm like, I got to hit him again and try to get him on the ground or get another arrow in him. So he's standing there. I draw back, I shoot, and I peg one right into the tree that he's standing behind. And it's only like 3 inches, and it pegs right into the tree. I'm like, are you kidding? So he runs off. So, an hour later or whatever, towards evening, I get down, I find blood. We're tracking him. My friend comes out who owns the property. We're looking for him. And we spent, maybe an hour and a half, and it's getting dark. And he's like, you know what? Let's come back out in the morning. Okay. We'll pick up blood. We'll mark last blood. We'll pick it up. We'll get this done. I'm like, awesome. He's like, in the meantime, Rick on the other end of the property. And these guys in Minnesota, they've got, 6, 7, 8,000 acres of land out there. And none of it's high fenced or anything. It's all accessible, but they do such a good job managing their property. Anyways, he said that Rick had shot a doe on the other side of the property. He's like, let's go help him find him. So we drive over to Rick, and we find blood immediately. And it's just blood spray everywhere on both sides.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking at any moment, we're going to find his deer. We're going to come around a little turn, and the deer's just going to be balled up right there. And we keep going, never can find the thing. Then eventually we find the arrow, and this blood trail's leading into a patch up in front of us. And Rick's 6'5", so he's got an angle. I'm 5'10", so he's got an angle. He can see better than I can. And he's like, oh, there it is. There's a deer. And you can see this deer's eyes in this little patch of brush. And so I'm like, cool, that's your deer. Let's go finish it off. And he's like, no, that's not my deer. And I'm like, no, of course it's your deer. He's like, no, that's a buck. And I'm like, really? I'm like, let me see. So I look, and it was my buck. And I knew it was my buck because he had a broken one tine, I believe, on his left side, G3 or G4. I can't remember right offhand. I've got it out here, but one of his tines was broken off in half. And this one had that same. I'm like, oh, that's my buck. How
that's
did
crazy.
It get over here? Like, it went as far as it possibly could in that night.
And stayed on the property, which is amazing.
Yeah, exactly. And bedded down right to a place that we walked up to. That's so weird.
Yeah.
So Rick's like, well, that's your deer. And I'm with Rick and Matt, and I think maybe Matt's dad and maybe 1 or 2 other guys. And I'm like, sweet. And they're like, well, shoot it. I'm like, well, I don't have my bow. Because I didn't come out looking for my deer, looking to hunt. Like, I came out to help Rick kill his deer. So I drive back to the shop, grab my bow, come back. The deer is still bedded up, and it's nighttime. He's bedded down. So I shoot him, and I miss because it's dark. I'm like, okay. And he's just laying there. So I draw back, I shoot another one, and I just peg him. He gets up, and he's about 15 yards from me. He gets up, he runs straight at me. I've got my bow in one hand, and I'm like trying to wonder which way. He's charging at me. And he gets close, and finally I dive out of the way. And all of a sudden I hear, don't shoot, don't shoot. This is Matt saying, don't shoot. And Rick on the run shoots the thing on the run and hits it. And it runs off, and we hear it run crashing through about maybe 10, 15 yards, runs into a ditch filled with water. So we go over there, and we're like, cool, he's got to be dead. We heard him splashing around. He's got to be dead. We get there, and the water's up to his back, essentially. Yeah. And he's stuck. He's almost dead. He's stuck. So I knock another arrow. I'm like, we got to kill this thing. And I shoot him in the high shoulder, kind of the back, because that's all that was showing in the ditch. The rest of him was covered by water. And he just kind of looks at me and like shrugs his shoulders like it was no big deal.
Jeez.
I'm like, what in the world? And they're like, well, shoot him again. I'm like, I'm out of arrows. I had shot 2 arrows at the food plot where I shot him. I had shot 2 arrows once I found him. And then I shot 1 more arrow when he was in the ditch. I'm like, I'm out of arrows. Like he would have died. And I'm like, you shoot him, Rick. So Rick shoots him. And, 20, 30 seconds later, the thing finally dies. But we drag the thing out of there. I can
only shoot things that are moving.
Yeah. We dragged the thing out of there. He's almost 300 pounds. I mean, the biggest deer I ever shot. And Tom, so that's the guy who owns the property. He's a great person. He's a great guy. He's like, you better, let's get this deer out of here before people start landing here. It looks like a runway strip because this deer's got 4 arrows sticking out of it with all the knocks on. It was absolutely, and people are like, you should have made better shots. I'm like, we made good shots. The deer just didn't die. It was crazy.
That's insane. How far was the deer from you? I know that you said Matt was going, don't shoot, and Rick shot. How far was the deer from you after charging you when Rick hit it?
20, 30 yards tops, probably 20 yards. Okay. Yeah.
I was worried it was even closer than that, but
no, it may have been. I don't remember because I was on the ground getting up after this deer charged me and I hear, don't shoot. And then I hear thwack. So he may have even been closer. I don't know.
That's amazing. That's with funny. Rick's old bow, right? His 30-year-old
he still has
tech or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, he got some new limbs for it, and he's a killer with that thing. He bought a new bow, and then he returned it because he didn't like it and got some new limbs for his old bow. And I'm not going to get into it, but he broke his bow on this last hunt.
Oh, did he? Frustration or like after he got new limbs and then broke it?
And then broke it. Yeah. It wasn't frustration. He fell on it.
Oh, Jesus. Did he fall out of a tree stand or something or what?
Yeah, he fell off the stairs of a box blind.
Okay.
He's already afraid of heights as it is. And so he put his hand somewhere where I guess there wasn't a rail where he put his hand and overcorrected and fell off. He was fine. But I think he smashed his bow and broke something. I don't know, something on it, and it broke.
That's crazy, man. I actually blew up my bow like a week before antelope season. After Hawaii, I was out shooting a 3D range with some buddies, which there's the start to the problem. But it's a turkey. It's 20 yards. I'm like, no big deal. I put the arrow in, and I'm like, did I range this? And I did range it, but I couldn't remember the range. So then I take my arrow out, put it back in my quiver.
That's it.
Range it again, put my rangefinder back down, and just pull back. And the guy, it's funny because I've got the bow full back. They're recording me in super slow-mo, so I've got this stupid video. And the funniest thing is I fire, and my string just pops off. Pops off. And I'm like, what the hell just happened? And my buddy's like, I don't know, man, but your arrow went way over there. And I'm like, oh, did it? And so then we watch the video, and we're watching the video for like 5-10 seconds before I'm like, there is no arrow.
No
arrow.
You're
talking about my arrow's way over there. Are you crazy? But yeah, I just blew it up. Fortunately, I was shooting a Hoyt. Took it into the shop. Took it into 2 different shops just to get make sure I have some good opinions on the thing. And every person when I walked in was like, "Good thing you got a Hoyt." Because if you had, I won't name the other brands, but if you had one of those, your entire bow would have exploded. But he's like, Hoyts are tanks. So fortunately, I was able to just get a new set of strings from a buddy of mine down in Texas. And he sent them up, got them very strong, sighted in, and shot an antelope. So it worked out just fine.
Awesome.
In fact, I'd actually never replaced my strings before, so it was kind of something I'd been meaning to do. And bow shot better than it ever has, but I'm lucky it didn't explode.
Perfect. Yeah, I've dry fired my bow doing something very, very similar. Just Jack chatting. And John, a 3D course, and drew back, and cam stops went. It probably was part of your bow that flew back. Cam stops or something that flew back that looked like maybe it was the arrow. Actually, just a couple of weeks ago, before Minnesota, I was outside of my backyard here, and I was, just doing some practice shots, and I draw my bow back, and all of a sudden it just goes poof, and my release, I shoot a thumb release, rips out of my hand. It goes 20, 30 yards to the side of me. My arrow just drops down 20 yards below the target. I'm like, what happened? Because the release just pulled out of my hand. I'm like, did I let go of the release without doing the thing. It just ripped out of my hand. I'm like, what in the world? So I go over, I get my arrow, and then I walk over to get my release, and I'm like, what is happening with my release? The little hinge on it that you click in on the thumb release, that thing had just blown out. So when I pulled it back, the actual mechanic, the little hinge just snapped and busted, and it ripped it out of my hand. Good thing my bow didn't blow up.
That's terrifying, man. Yeah, I guess your arrow is probably in there enough to give it a little bit of relief from that sheer power that comes from a bow.
And I was all the way I think I was either all the way drawn back or right at the end of the stop. So I mean I was close anyways, but it was big old chunk taken out of my bow because the release hit the chunk on the riser. It's crazy.
Jeez, man. Well, there's a new fear unlocked for me. I didn't know I had to be worried about that. All right. Well, hey, I got another one I want to hear, Ryan. So I drew a moose tag this year, cow moose. I did get it on opening day, but I know that you got I think a bull moose up in the Northeast, right?
Yeah, in Maine. My son and I went on a moose hunt up there. I would love to hear
that story. If it's worth telling, you tell me. But I know you've told me
I love that story.
Well, then let's do that and also talk a little bit about the draw, because I know that you were a little bit surprised when that thing happened. So why don't you go ahead and jump into that one?
Well, yeah, so we lived in Maine for about 4 years, and from the time that we moved there, I'd been putting in for a moose tag, and 3 years into it, I get a phone call from a friend of mine, John Milan. John Milan, sorry. He said, "Hey, man, you drew out. Congratulations." I'm like, "Drew out for what? What are you talking about?" He's like, "You drew a bull moose tag." And I'm like, "Really?" He's like, "Yeah." I'm like, "Oh my gosh," because there's guys I knew there that had been putting in for 25 years and hadn't drawn out. So I'm like, "Really?" He's like, "Yeah." And so I looked at the zone, and I knew a fish and game guy up there, and I was like, "Hey, what zone should I put in for?" And he's like, "Do this order." And so I looked at the zone, and it was my first pick. It was the best zone. I'm like, this is awesome. So the way that it works in Maine is that you have, I think they call it a sub permittee. So I was the permit holder. I had the tag itself. But in Maine, you can have this sub permittee, and the sub permittee can go out and actually shoot with you. So it's kind of a party hunt between two people. You just have to designate who your sub permittee is. And I think they do it that way because it's such a low success rate as far as getting a tag goes that they want to make sure the moose is on the ground.
Yeah,
so
they want to make that harvest rate high. Yeah,
exactly. Okay. Yeah. So we're out there, and I go out there a day before my son does. We got an outfitter, and it's really cool place. And this guy had 100% success rate. And I'm like, cool, we'll go with you. And I go out there a day before, and my son, I think, had a football game, so he couldn't go. And I said, well, if I see a moose, do you want me to shoot it? He's like, I only want you to shoot it if it's like a Maine state record. But outside of that, I don't want you to shoot it. I want to be there with you.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, yeah, we can do that. No problem. So I go out there, and within the first hour,
that's a real good answer.
Yeah. Within the first hour, I see this, decent bull moose. And I turn to Mike, that's my guide. I'm like, Mike, is this a shooter? He's like, yeah, that's probably a shooter. He's like, do you want to shoot it? I'm like, is it, yeah, it's a shooter, or it's a shooter? And he's like, it's pretty good. It's maybe not a first day shooter, but it's a pretty good bull.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, my son's not here. I'm going to pass. He's like, no problem. I understand. So we passed on that. The next day, Brecken comes out, and we find this really nice bull, and we try to work ourselves into it, but he blew out of there. And then we got busted by another smaller bull. He's like, do you want to shoot that one? I'm like, no, that one's small compared to all of them. And so we passed on that. I think the next day I saw a little guy on the road, and we passed on him. And then the next day it got really warm, and we didn't see a moose for like 3 days.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh,
that's
no,
frustrating.
like, this is a 6-day hunt, and that's it.
Yeah.
So I'm like, oh no, like we should have shot the 2 or 3 that we've seen before. We didn't see another moose. And the last day we're driving up the road, kind of going to this place that we're going to glass a little bit. And about 300 yards in front of us, we see 2 bull moose standing up there on the road, and they look like decent bulls. So we get out of the truck, we start working our way in a little bit. I've got my gun. I left my binoculars in the truck, but I've got my gun, so I'm looking through the sight, and I can see that there's two of them. And Mike's like, we can't shoot right here because we don't know which one's which. So like, let's go get our shooting sticks and we'll try to work in a little bit closer and see if we can isolate one and make a shot. So we're like, cool. So I had zoomed all the way in on my optic to see what they were. And so we start walking back to the truck. And as we're walking back, I see this cow pop up just to the side of us, maybe 40, 50 yards. This cow pops up and she's just staring at us. I'm like, oh no. So we stop. And then as soon as we kind of stop and look, a really nice bull stands up right behind her at about 80 yards. And he just stands up there and looks at us. Now, Brecken and I had made the plan, that's my son, had made the plan that we were going to do like a 3-2-1 fire shoot kind of thing. So both of us get shot and hopefully we hit and kill the animal. So
shooting at the same animal, same time.
Same animal, same time. We just want to get lead. And that's what our guide said, get as much lead to that animal because they're hard to kill. I'm like, okay. So Brecken's like, all right, Dad, you ready? And we don't have our sticks, so we're just shooting off our shoulders at this point because it's 80 yards. Like, we have a shot. Let's take it. So Brecken's like, all right, 3, 2. I'm like, hold on. Because my optic was zoomed in all the way that it was so far zoomed in, I couldn't see. So I'm trying to zoom out, and he's like, 3, 2, 1. And he starts shooting, and I hadn't even zoomed out my optic. Yeah. So he's shooting, and he takes, I think, 3 shots and misses all 3 of them.
No way.
And I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, finally I find it. I shoot. I miss. So now we shot.
At this point or still just standing there?
No, it's standing broadside at 80 yards. Both of us are just excited as hell. So we both miss. So he shoots 3 times, misses. I shoot once, I miss. And then time, I remember, just slowed down. I'm like, I can't believe this thing's still standing here, but it is. I have one more shot on this animal. So I remember, chambering the next round, shooting, and the thing just drops. Boom! Drops on the ground. And Brecken, he's young at this time. He's like 12 or 13, maybe 13.
Yeah. I love that Brecken, he's just rattling off rounds, though, man.
Oh, didn't have a care. He's just getting after it. And so Brecken, as soon as the thing drops, Brecken runs over to it. And I'm like, whoa, wait, Breck. And Mike's yelling at him, stop. Finally, we get him to stop, and both of us look at him like, what are you doing? He's like, I don't know, I'm excited. I'm like, just wait a second. And so he stops, and then all of a sudden, 4 big bulls stand up in the same place and run off.
No way.
And so I'm thinking, oh, dude, I shot this bull, but he ran off. Like, he got up and ran off with these other 3 or 4 bulls, these other 3 bulls that ran off with him.
Yeah.
So they're running off, and we wait for a minute, and we go look, and I'm like, okay, where's blood? We're going to have to track this animal and then finally kill him, but where is it? And so we're walking, and I'm like, man, I don't see any blood. And all of a sudden, Brecken's got a great eye. He's like, there he is. And sure enough, he was just balled up right where I shot him. He had just dropped right there. And man, I'll never forget the hug. Like, when we walked up, the hug that Brecken gave me, and just the success that we had on it. It didn't go flawlessly, but it's a story that I'll remember forever. So we cleaned him up right there as best we could, got him pulled out of there. I think he had, if I remember correctly, a 47 or 48 inch span, and he ended up being 900. For that. So there's a couple of different species. So you have like your Yukon, like your Alaskan moose. Those are going to be like a big moose would be, like 60 inches would be a good sized moose. Shiras, I believe they're called, which is what these were. 48 inches, 50, that's 52, Shiras, 53. They're big. They're big. So this was a big
That's what we
moose.
have in Colorado. Yeah. I don't think I've ever seen one that big here in Colorado. Yeah. So I've seen some big bodied moose, but their antlers are just, they're fine.
No, this thing was a monster. It weighed 920 pounds. And, we got into the back of the truck that afternoon, or that, late that morning, early afternoon, and drove home and got to the butcher that afternoon. It was awesome, man. And so, I had him shipped back from Maine because I'm in southern Utah now, but he's on the wall out front, and he is 4 feet wide by 4 feet deep from nose to shoulder and 4 feet tall. So it's this huge, massive animal.
Are you ready to elevate your archery game? Summit Bowstrings delivers premium strings for all archers, crafted with bloodline fiber and BCY material stretched for unmatched consistency. Choose from 3 series: Hunter, Competition, and Summit. Each string is built bison tough with unique techniques for extreme durability and performance. Ideal for both seasoned hunters and target archers. Experienced strings designed to handle any challenge. Visit summitbowstrings.com and use HSP10 for a 10% discount. God, I mean, I wouldn't even have a place to put that in my house. That's amazing, man.
Yeah, fortunately, we have some vaulted ceilings in the living room, so there's enough of a pitch that gives us some room. It's turning into a wildlife museum out there, though, especially with our animals coming back from Africa and my deer and my goats. I have so many stories, man. It's awesome.
That's amazing. Yeah, I shot my first archery elk last year, and I had it taxidermied. My wife was like, "Yeah, it's great. No more taxidermy."
Really?
So
yeah,
that's the one I got, and I have like a high entryway, and I was able to put that guy up. I won't say he's quite 4x4x4, but big 310, 313 inch bull.
That's awesome. Yeah, I saw him. He's awesome.
I'm no longer allowed to to have like fully taxidermy. She doesn't like the fake eyes. She doesn't like things looking at her. So Euro mounts from this point forward for me. Yeah.
Yeah. I do some. I have some Euro mounts, like my Hawaiian animals. The first deer I ever shot with Colin, in fact, like I was telling you, that's a Euro mount. But I don't know. I like shoulder mounts. They always look nice and clean. And, you know, the moose isn't the highest quality. At some point, he'll need to be redone, which I'm kind of frustrated with. But it is what it is.
Yeah. 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 You still have the memories, which is what's important.
Yeah.
Well, thanks I'm glad I know a couple of your stories, but are there any ones, Ryan, that stand out to you that you are like, I got to tell this story? Because, you know, I don't know all of your stories. I just know a handful.
I mean, I think one of the ones that I like the most is going out with Colin on my very first hunt. You know, I think because a lot of people, like, they want to get into hunting. They don't know how, or, you know, they think it's hard or whatever. And it is hard. It's challenging, but they don't think they can do it, and they can. But yeah, I went out there with Colin. He reached out. I'm kind of speeding up the story a little bit about how he got to be connected, but Colin's a guy who just always followed through on his commitments to me and keeps his word. And so he reached out to me. I didn't know him real well. We had gone to SHOT Show in Vegas earlier in the year, and he reached out to me and he said, "Hey man, do you want to come on a hunt?" And I'm like, I've never been hunting before. He's like, "I know, I want to take you on your first hunt." I'm like, "Well, that sounds cool. What do I need?" He's like, "You need a bow and you need this rifle." I'm like, "Well, I don't have either of those." He's like, "I know, go get them." So that's what I did. I went out and bought what is it called? A Ruger 308 American. I think it's called American.
Okay.
The 308.
Yeah, that's my first main rifle too, a Ruger American, and I got it in the 270.
Oh yeah,
it's a good rifle.
Cool. It's a great rifle. That's actually what I shot my moose with and a lot of my deer with.
Oh wow.
If I was rifle hunting,
okay.
Yeah. So I wasn't sure if it would be strong enough, powerful enough for the moose, but it was the one shot, the one bullet that hit dropped it the thing in its tracks. So it was
Did you hit it in the heart, I assume?
No, I actually hit it in the neck and it just dropped. Yeah.
Damn.
Yeah.
Huh.
So, it was kind of like the front shoulder neck area was where it hit him.
Okay.
Anyways, so yeah, I went out there with my rifle. I also got a bow. And the first day I was out there, we went out to this place in Texas because this guy needed to cull the herd a little bit. He had some bucks in there and some bad genetics that he wanted out of there. And it wasn't high fenced. It was private property, but not high fenced, but he still is trying to manage the land real well. So yeah, I go out there and Colin and I are sitting in a blind and a deer walks in, a buck, and it looks small to me. I don't really know. I just saw it looked like a spike to me is what it looked like.
Yeah.
And I'm like, "Should I shoot that one?" He's like, "Yeah." I'm like, "I don't know. It's small, isn't it?" He's like, "These are the ones they want to get out of their property." I'm like, "Oh, is he not young?" He's like, "No, I don't think he's young. I think it's just bad genetics." I'm like, "Okay." So I line up to take the shot and I had my phone on my knee and as I was lining up, it fell off and Siri accidentally bumped Siri. And Siri's like, "I'm sorry, I cannot understand your request," or whatever. And I'm like, "Oh boy." And I thought the deer would run, but the deer just stayed there. So I'm like, okay, it just stayed there. So lined up, took the shot. Like I said, 75, 80 yards. and it ran off. And I'm a new hunter. I don't know anything about it. So it runs off and I'm like, oh, I missed him. And Colin's like, no, you didn't miss him. You hit him. I'm like, he ran off. He's like, yeah, they do that. Like, they don't just always just drop where you shoot them. I'm like, oh, really? He's like, yeah. So I run up there, or we walk up there. We wait 30, 40 minutes. He's like, it's a good shot. It's dead. We walk up there and we find where I shot it, but there's only a little bit of blood there. And then we just couldn't find any blood, but we did follow it where it ran. And so we walked over there and it was 40 yards from where I shot it and it was dead. And, it was a really bittersweet moment because that's what I went out there to do. But then you see this animal lying on the ground that you killed and it's like, oh, I took that animal's life. It doesn't bother me now. I mean, it's not that I want to be out and just be like some sort of ruthless killer. It doesn't bother me. It is part of the circle of life. But that first one was a bit of a challenge for me. And so, I still have him. It's the first deer I ever put out. We call him Crab Claw. He was I'll have to show you a picture sometime, but he's an 8 or 9 year old deer, and he's got the main beams, and he's got just two small little eye guards, very small little eye guards, main beam, but they're thick. They're like this, thick main beam, and then right at the end, just two little crab claws right at the end. He is the funkiest, weirdest deer I've ever shot. And I got him back, and the guy that we went with was like, dude, this is exactly the kind of deer I need to get out of here. Cause it's just bad genetics.
Yeah.
And
been
I'm
around
thinking
a long
to myself,
time, making a lot of babies. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm thinking to myself, this deer is rad. Like, he's so weird looking. And I love weird deer. Like the deer that I shot last year in Minnesota he's the biggest deer I've ever shot. He's an 8-point, but on his left side is a split beam, and his main beam is probably this thick. It's massive.
Was that 4 inches thick? Jesus.
At least, yeah. And it splits. It's a split beam is what it is. And so it's really weird, but he's my favorite deer because I like the weird one. I don't like your I like them. Sure. If I saw a big typical, I'd shoot it. And I do have a couple of typicals in the house, but I like the weird, the non-typical, the funky. That's the kind of deer I like.
That's cool. I've only shot one whitetail ever, and he's pretty typical, minus the fact he's got a bunch of little like weird points coming off. Like I shot him down in South Texas where they have, I think he was a pretty young deer, but I was hunting public land, so it's like, I don't care. I'm going to shoot whatever I can.
Shoot what you can.
I would guess he was 2.5 to 3 years, somewhere in that range. I don't really know these things. His body wasn't very big, but he's 120 inches, like big antlers. But again, this is an area that's known to have 400-inch freak non-typical deer, like crazy things. So I was like, hey, I'm just going to shoot if I see anything, it's going down. And it was with a shotgun, but his brow tines, one like swoops down and the other one swoops like back. And it's awesome. Like the rest of it's pretty normal, but his brow tines are just like doing all sorts of crazy stuff. He's got, I mean, if the rule is, if it's like taller than it is wide, right, you can technically count it as a point. And in that case, he's like a 30-pointer because he's got a whole bunch of these little bumps that are starting to grow.
That's crazy.
But they're tiny. They're tiny little things. They're just slightly taller than they are wide.
You shot the 30-point buck, man.
Yeah, I guess you could say that. But really, he's I don't know, like a 5x5. He's a cool buck. I love him, and he's the only whitetail I've ever had any success with. I haven't been whitetail hunting that many times.
I like whitetail better than mule deer. Now I've never shot a mule deer. I've been on mule deer hunts, and I've been skunked 2 or 3 times. That's what they have here in Utah is mule deer. Mostly the Southwest. But I love going to the Midwest. Minnesota, and that's really the only other place I've hunted whitetail, anyways. And I love whitetail. I think they're just amazing creatures. They're delicious. Like they're just fun to hunt. And we always have a good crew in Minnesota with us as well.
That's cool, man. Yeah, I just haven't had much experience. I do have a buddy who has a couple hundred acres in southeast Kansas. I'm going to try and go out next year.
Oh,
he's got like 180-inch deer. So we'll see.
I'm sure. He's
my
got
wife
some
doesn't
out there.
Yeah, my wife doesn't love whitetail, but she's only had Texas whitetail where it's hot. Maybe the meat's not processed quick enough. So I'm hoping to do it in a colder weather and see if she's into it, because if it's not going to feed my
depends
family,
on what they're eating,
for me,
too.
I'm not going to go out. True. Yeah. Very true.
I mean, if you're in Kansas and they're over a food plot or they're eating corn, and like it's gonna be good meat for sure.
Yeah. Talking about weird antlers. I shot this antelope this year. I don't know if you can see this, but he had completely snapped off his tine or his
prong.
I
can see that. He's missing
Isn't that
that.
Weird?
Yeah, that is weird.
So it's just like one of them's just
a horn.
straight.
That's cool.
Super cool.
That's really cool.
Super cool old beast. He made one mistake, and that's I got very lucky. Antelope hunting for archery antelope hunting. I don't know if I want to do it again. It's too hard.
It's tough. So were you in a blind, or how do you do that with antelope?
Nope.
Spot and stock?
I wasn't a blind to start that day. I put in a lot of days, but yeah, spot and stock. I'm in this particular unit. They're everywhere, literally all over the place, and you see them. And it got like at first we see them, we'd attack, and then we started to realize, okay, there's no point in attacking them if they have any clue
pushing
that you're
them all
there.
over the place. Yeah,
yeah, and they hang out at like 120 yards where they know they can't shoot you, and they'll just run. And so like we'd find some that were bedded, looking the other way, and I have a foot of elevation and a foot of bush, and I'm trying to sneak in that 2 feet of cover, 500 yards. I got to like 100 yards, and then he stood up, and I just laid face down in the dirt for an hour, just like because he didn't know what I was, he didn't recognize me. Just miserable experience. But at the end of the day, we're driving around. I actually have access to small private property, and so we go down there, and I actually stalk into like 30 yards on a herd because it was just that that super low light that gives you really long shadows, and anything walking in those shadows is invisible. So I just had this perfect scenario. I walked in on all of these antelope. Turns out all does, not one buck in that herd, and I was just so frustrated. I get back to the truck where my buddy's watching me and laughing at me, and it gets cold quick, and we're driving back. And as we're driving down the highway, we just keep Onyx on to see, hey, maybe we're next to public. So let's just leave it on. So we're driving down and we see him on the side of the road, probably about 100 yards off the side of the road. And we're like, hey, he's actually kind of on the other side of a hill. So we pull over, turn around, drive back, and we don't see him. And I'm like, shit, what just happened? So we go up farther, turn around, come back the way we were originally coming, and he's there again. And so my buddy just literally flies off the road. And it's not like there's an obvious place to pull over. We're going over like a 2-foot little drop off the road into this hill, and so I jump out, and there's a fence there, and I don't even remember going over it, but I run out of the car, jump over the fence, and I'm like walking up this hill with my rangefinder out, and I'm like, where is he? And all of a sudden I see that big white rump, and I'm just like, holy crap! And I range him. It's 39 yards. And I'm like, no way. Like, I must be hitting some grass or something in between me and him. Like, there's no way.
And he can't see you at this point?
I mean, he could. He's just pointed the other way, fortunately.
Right, that's what I mean. Yeah, he's not. He doesn't see you, though. Yeah.
Yeah. My guess is he just broke off that prong, and he was eating and resting, and he had just been in a brawl and was just tired because he was not doing typical antelope things. So I think he just was a little beat up right then. So, so I range him like 4 times, and I'm like, all right. Here we go. And so I pull back, and occasionally when you pull back, your arrow sort of rattles inside of your arrow rest. Yeah. That rattle, he turns his head, and I'm like, whoop. So with my moose, which was like 4 days earlier, it was the perfect release, surprise release. The arrow went exactly when I wanted. With the antelope, it was like, oh shit, boom, punch that trigger, and I just flung that arrow as quick as I could because I saw him see me. And for the people that don't know, antelope are the fastest animal in North America. Second fastest animal in the world. Man, they are crazy. And they're not even antelope. They are goats. But yeah, I just let it rip. It dropped in right behind his shoulder because he was quartering away. It went through, but it didn't pass through. So I had arrow on both sides of him. I turn around and I'm pumping my fists like, I can't believe I did it. I can't believe And then I'm like, wait a minute, I should, and this is last light, like last lights. I'm like, I should actually see where this animal goes in case he runs for 4 miles. Fortunately, when I turned around, I saw my lighted knock, and he was about 100 yards down the road, and he was just circling and piled up probably in under 10 seconds. So he made a mistake, and I got lucky. That's all there is to it.
No, yeah, it's not luck, man. That's skill. You guys are in the right place. You made a good shot. You stocked up on him. Maybe there's a series of fortunate events. The fact that you even saw him, but the rest of it's not lucky. It's just work.
Hey, I'll take lucky over good any day. I mean, I spent of that day, I had probably spent 4 hours crawling through sagebrush, stalking.
Yeah, you put in the work, man.
Was 10 seconds from when we pulled over to like over the fence and shot.
And that's what people don't see is they think, oh, it's easy. You just walk up, hop over the fence, shoot an animal at 40 yards, it's done. It's like, no, you didn't see the 17 missed shots or the 10 blown stalks or, you didn't see all of that stuff. You just saw the last one and thought that's how it went.
That's true. I was coming up on losing the rest of my arrows that I had still from our Hawaiian hunt. I was getting low. That's for sure. Yeah. Well, cool, Ryan. You got any other stories for us? I know we're running low on time here. If not, we can wrap things up, man.
No, I mean, I could talk for days about these stories. Like, gosh,
Yeah.
I mean, one story
We
like
can always
last
have you
year's.
back.
I mean, I might do that.
You know?
I had a really cool goat hunt in Hawaii last year. I almost died on Father's Day with my son. That was an interesting one.
Yeah, that is an interesting one. Well, let's do this. I mean, unless you have the time, because I know that you said you have until
I
about
actually
10.
do have to go, but we can do a round 2. I'd love to do that.
Perfect, brother. All right, well then let's do this. Why don't we tell the folks where they can find you, whether it's your social medias or the Order of Man or wherever you want to filter people to. And I do highly encourage everyone to take this seriously and follow up with Ryan because he's doing some cool stuff. So go ahead.
I appreciate it, man. Biggest thing, if you want to follow and connect with me, is at Ryan Michler. My last name is Michler on Instagram. That's where I'm most active. If you want to know more about our organization, what we do, orderofman.com will get you to our website. You can find the podcast at Order of Man and everything else that you need. If you just type that in, Order of Man, you'll find everything.
Perfect. I'll put links to everything in the show notes as well, so people can just go in there and click.
Thank you.
And I'll say this: I've met like 10 to 15 guys that are part of the Order of Man, and they are all amazing guys that go out of their way to just check up on me randomly and see how I'm doing. And I'll admit I'm not a member of the Order of Men. I've definitely thought about it, and I've been looking for a job for these couple months here, but it's something that I plan on doing when I can get there. But man, you're breeding a great group of guys. So thank you for what you're doing, Ryan.
Man. I appreciate that. Yep, I'm really grateful for the opportunities that we have and this opportunity to be here on this podcast with you. So hopefully we'll get some more hunts in together and keep having some of these good stories to share.
Sounds good, man. Thank you again.
Thank you, brother.
All right, guys. That's it. Another couple stories in the books. Again, I want to thank Ryan, of course, for coming on the podcast. Ryan, I really do appreciate it. I know you're a very busy man, and I do hope we get to have you back on in the future because I know you got plenty of more stories to tell. But beyond that, guys, I said it at the beginning, I really do encourage you to check out what he's doing. Check out the show notes. Check him out on Instagram, Facebook. Check out the Order of Man, all of those things. If you are struggling or just want to be a better man, it's a great place to start and surround yourself with some great guys. So that's it, guys. Final notes, I guess. Thank you, Ryan. And if you guys are listening, whatever you're listening to right now, please give us a review. Also give us a follow and share the podcast with one other person. That way we get some other people reaching out to me going, hey, I got some crazy stories, and we get more episodes coming to you, as quickly as we can. So that's it, guys. Thank you very much. Appreciate you all. Now get out there and make some stories of your own. Thank you.